Are we being punked? I'm asking this genuinely. Duet Night Abyss just revealed a whole slew of new demon wedges that will be coming in the new update, and the majority of them are specific to the Animo element and work with the resolve mechanic. I knew they were obsessed with Psyche, we've talked about that, but if anybody had any doubts, this should put them to rest. But their obsession isn't what I'm here to talk about today. I'd like to discuss something very different and possibly more serious to the game's future. I'm Shrike, like, comment, and subscribe for more DNA content. Let's dive in. So new wedges for the game is exciting, right? Even if they're only for one element and one game mechanic. Which, if I'm honest, may not be the case. They may just have shown us one of the elements. But regardless, you still have to consider what goes into building up demon wedges. The amount of grinding the same commission over and over, or the cost and secret letter clues, which take forever to farm. And as for the gold, it's even longer. First you need the blueprint, and then grind a single stage until you biodegrade, and even then you still need to level up that wedge using Carmine Globule, which you can only farm from one commission, and at a soul-crushingly pitiful amount at a time. So imagine you've been doing this each day, being efficient about it, and only grabbing gold wedges that could be applied to many different characters. Cruising along with the real endgame of DNA, the gold wedge grind. Let's assume you aren't in the 1% of players that have full gold maxed out demon wedges for all their characters. Let's just assume you're a real human being, and you have maybe one character fully golded, with maybe a few dupes on each wedge. That's about where I am. And now imagine that these new exciting wedges come out, and they aren't unique and interesting effects that change the gameplay of your characters. No, instead they are exact upgrades to the ones you've already just spent hours a day grinding for. Ones you've spent thousands of secret letter clues to get the blueprints for. Countless runs of the escort mission to get the globules necessary to level them up. And now they're no longer best in slot. Now you need to do all of that all over again for the new ones, because they're just flat out better than what you have. And now do that every patch, every month. This is power creep. It's almost as synonymous with gacha as 50/50s. But when DNA announced its departure from that monetization system, we had hoped everything associated with gacha would also be left by the wayside. But here we see a remnant. So typical in a gacha game, as they come out with new characters and new gear pieces, they try to make the effects exciting and powerful, so we'll want to play with them and pay for them. It's the worst when it's with characters, since many people have spent real money to try and luck into these shiny new characters just to have the next one render them essentially obsolete. The jury is still out on whether the new characters in DNA will power creep old existing ones, but it seems very likely that the demon wedges will be heavily power crept. And this is not just unfortunate, it's actually debilitating for a game like this. Gear creep is typically fine when acquiring and leveling that gear doesn't take very long. But in a game that takes as much grinding as Duet Night Abyss does, players cannot just rebuild their characters with the shiny new wedge every single update. It's simply not feasible for the average player. And there's something even deeper at play here. Who are the players that will be hurt most by this power creep? The players who have a ton of gold wedges already. The more they have, the more they will be affected. The players who don't care about this, the ones who won't be affected, are the casual players who haven't even bothered with gold wedges yet. Because it is possible to remake all of your characters with purple wedges in between each update. And it most likely won't be every one of them that you need to replace, since chances are not every single new wedge will power creep an existing one. At least hopefully not. But still, the point is that this decision from the devs will punish their most active, dedicated, and sweaty players, and it will most likely result in players simply not golding any of their characters, for fear of all that time and all those resources going to waste. So they've basically nuked the entire gold wedge farming part of their game if they continue with this. People will be afraid to invest so much into a new wedge, so all of your sweatiest players will just stick with purple wedges, and those heavily affected may end up being the minority of players, assuming the majority are casuals. But still, if you're catering your game to the players who barely play your game and hurting the players who practically live in it, you're only hurting yourself, because those casual players players will probably end up leaving anyway, as they weren't very invested in the first place, and you'll only be left with players that you've just pissed off. I'm very concerned at this new development and the new direction that the game has chosen to go. It seems antithetical to the success of their game. I fully support new Wedges, even though we have an overwhelming amount already, but they should offer things that aren't in the game yet, effects or mechanics that haven't appeared yet on a Wedge, more movement-based Wedges, more customization ones that change the way your weapons function, or stat-based ones, but ones that are currently missing. Electro is lacking in many Wedge types. They shouldn't be direct upgrades to existing Wedges. Not yet, at least. Maybe a year into the game, but not this early. The inclusion of more center Wedges is actually great, and I'm incredibly glad they've added these. But while we're on the subject, these need to be separated from the general Wedge population, and explained far better than they were. Nothing in the game explained that these are in any way different from the peripheral Wedges, except that only certain ones could be placed there. When selected, it should only list ones available to place there. That's just basic quality of life that should have been in the game since launch. And for crying out loud, call them something. Give them a name so we can differentiate them. Center Wedges, Serpent Wedges, Core Wedges. But anyway, that's a tangent, I won't go down any further. You get the point. Core Wedges, we did need more of. And some of the other Wedges seem like good additions to the game, as long as other elements besides Animo are included. But the inclusion of such obvious power creep, especially on the Wings inspo, and so early in the game's life at that, concerns me. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. And with that being said, I'm gonna fly. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.